So in this episode, I'm going to share how you can buy your competitors right now. Now, I know that sounds big. I'm going to break it down of who in your market you may be able to buy, how you can approach them, how you can understand the psychology in order to ensure you can structure a creative deal. We're going to look at the financing. We're going to look at valuing. We're going to look at some of the creative deals that you can do and the different structures that you can follow. There's a lot of depth to it, but over the next 17 minutes, I'll break down exactly how you can grow through acquisition as a private practice hearing care leader. Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the #1 marketing and practice growth podcast for high-performing private practice hearing care leaders. It's Friday, and this is my end-of-week roundup of what's top of mind after 7 days of helping some of the world's best private practices to attract high-quality patients, fight the evil forces of manufacturer-owned chains, and be impossible to compete with. My name's Ollie Luke. Pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink, and let's have a chat. So welcome along to another episode of the Business of Hearing podcast, and today we're talking buying your competitors, right? A topic that for many practices feels like one of them things that is for the elite few, and I really want to break down how you can go about buying competitors in order to grow locally. And fundamentally, if we go back, there's always famously 3 ways to grow a business, right? It's either, and we'll apply it to hearing care, get more patients, get them to spend more, get them to spend more often, or for the wider business, more customers, higher frequency of purchase, spend more on average, right? But there is a 4th way to grow a practice and grow a business, and that is through acquisition, right? That is buying other businesses that are similar to yours and rolling them into your infrastructure. If you can do that, you can buy their revenue, you can buy their resources, you can buy their team, you can buy their patients, buy their database, roll it in, you naturally grow. And if we look at any of the biggest businesses in the world, it's rare that they've grown organically over time. They've usually acquired. And even look at Facebook, Google, like they're in the hundreds of acquisitions. Anybody that's ever a threat or a complement to their business, it's like, whoop, we'll overspend, we'll gobble you up. We've got the arbitrage, I can't pronounce that word, of being able to buy you and consolidate you and naturally roll up and overpay for that. So let's look at this from a private practice perspective, because when it comes to looking to acquire a competitor, whether that's a small competitor or even a similar size or larger competitor, it can somewhat feel overwhelming, right? It's like, I can't do that. I don't have millions in the bank. I don't want to step into significant debt with a manufacturer or with the bank. Therefore, it's not for me. And really what I want to do in our time together today is break down some of the alternative ways that you could go about acquiring a competitor. And I'm going to break it down because really there's 4 fundamental steps to buying one of your competitors, buy a business. But before I jump into that, I really want to give you some insights into the opportunity right now, because we are in, I'd say, one of the biggest periods of opportunity that we've seen in decades. Like, it's so significant. And it's all down to the boomers, right? 51% of all businesses in the US are owned by boomers. And as we know, there's 10,000 people retiring every single day as a result of reaching that age right now where they need to transition their wealth, transition their business, as a result of 70 million people in this boomer generation reaching a point of retirement. So we're seeing this big shift right now of a phenomenal amount of businesses that need to exit. And for the first time in a long time, there's significantly more people who need to sell their business than who are looking to buy a business, which is creating mass opportunity. And as a result of that, what is happening is, many businesses that are now looking to sell, unless they've got a buyer, they end up in a very compromised position because they want to protect their legacy, they want to ensure their staff, their patients are looked after, and unless somebody's coming to buy them, then what do? Shut the doors and let everybody down, continue to work far too late when they want to retire, and their husband and wife are telling them they need to give this up and stop working full-time hours, 50, 60-hour weeks, and spend more time actually enjoying retirement. Like, they're in this really compromised position. And you've got a big advantage if you're looking to buy one of them, because you are a ultimate safe pair of hands. You own a private practice, you've got success doing so. Therefore, you're their dream buyer of their business. And this creates immense opportunity, because if you look right now in your community, I'm going to guess there's a handful of practices that are owned by somebody that should be retiring soon, if not should have retired a little while ago, right? There's a host of these across the country. Like, they had a good run. They've been a great, solid provider in the area. They've got a database of patients. They've done good work for a period of time. They may have a team, but they need to exit the business. The challenge is they're too small for a manufacturer-owned chain. Like, they're a big chain that's willing to throw money at this, isn't interested in this small practice. And really, it needs somebody who can be an owner-manager in that business, i.e. needs somebody to take that and somewhat consolidate it or add it to their existing business in the area in order to grow that infrastructure. And that's where there's a huge opportunity for you. And the thing that excites me most here is with these kinds of deals, if it's a seller who's at a point where they need to exit, where they haven't got that many alternative options, it opens up creative deals that you can do. And that's what I want to talk about in this, in like different offer structures that you can utilize in order to acquire a competitor that meets this criteria where they're struggling to exit or find an alternative buyer. So let's dive into the 4-step process here of how you can go about this. First thing is naturally identifying who could be in that criteria where there's an opportunity to acquire them. So what I'd be looking at is who in the area is at a retirement age, has a practice that isn't huge, but is of size where it would need you to still manage and run that practice, right? They couldn't just sell this to somebody that wants to run it from a distance. It needs somebody who's going to be the driving force behind it, but it's got team there, it's got some providers there, it's got equipment, it's got patients. Like, that would what I'd be looking at. And I'm going to guess is 1 or 2 providers in your area where the owner is knocking on a bit. Like, they're at a point where they probably want to enjoy retirement at some point soon. They're the ones I'd be looking at, right? In terms of approaching them, it all depends if you've got a relationship, first of all. If you've got a relationship, then just dropping that question of, hey, like, if you're ever looking to sell the practice or you're ever looking to retire, then just know I'm here. Or if they don't know you that well or loosely know you, I always think the really smart way to do this is drop a message and subtly say, hey, if you know anybody in the area that's looking to sell their practice in the near future, could you let them know I'm interested? Like, almost use them as like the cheeky, I'm not asking you, I'm letting you know I'm interested in buying, but if you know somebody that's interested in selling, please let me know. You're subtly dropping that note that if they're interested, give you a shout. And we actually helped an Inner Circle member use that exact approach to buy a competitor not too long ago, which is fun. So firstly, it's about setting up those conversations. Second thing you need to understand is the seller psychology, and we use something called a MUD score in order to rate and review kind of where they're at in terms of how creative we can get with a deal. And MUD basically stands for motivation, urgency, and desire. And if you can score each of them out of 10, like how much motivation do they have to sell, how urgent is the sale, and how much desire do they have to sell? Like, if you can understand those 3, rate them, and then you get an understanding. Like, if somebody's like so motivated to sell, it's urgent because they desperately want to enjoy retirement, maybe they've got some health challenges, whatever it is, and the desire is super strong, then like you've got so much freedom to find a creative way for that seller to exit the business. Now, alternatively, let's say you've got a competitor that's 45, they have no plans to sell, but are open to it if the right offer comes along. Motivation super low, urgency is next to 0, desire to sell is 2 to 3. You haven't got any way to do a creative deal there. The only way you're going to get that seller to sell is if you turn up with a significant amount of money in order to make this extra attractive towards them. That's not what we're looking at here. But this seller psychology, if you can work out, ask the questions, understand where they're at, understand what they're looking to achieve, understand what's important to them, then you can ensure that you maximize seller psychology, understand this MUD score, and are able to then decide how creative you can get with the deal. Now, I will add, there is an important dynamic to this, is when it comes to buying a business, the price you buy it for isn't always the most important thing. There's a lot of underlying factors that are important to a seller. And one of the biggest ones is protection of legacy, right? If somebody's been running a practice in the community for 30 years, 40 years, 20 years, whatever it is, they still live in the community, they bump into their patients every day at the grocery store, then they've got legacy, right? They do not want to sell their practice to a big gormless group. It messes up all the patient promises that have been made on a personal level. It changes the staff. It takes something that was very personal and heartfelt and commercializes it to a point that it becomes unrecognizable. Like, that would damage the legacy of that owner. They would feel awkward when they bump into their patient in the grocery store who now isn't achieving the outcomes that were promised to them several years ago because of a result of this sale. So like those kind of factors can really play towards you finding a creative deal that is outside of money down on day one. So understanding that is super key. Third thing is being able to value a practice. Now, there's so many ways, and this could be an absolute big 10-hour masterclass on its own, and I wouldn't be the right person to deliver it. But in terms of valuing a business, fundamentally, you're looking to understand what is the EBITDA of that business. Like, what is the earnings before interest, deductibles, amortization? Really get clear on that number, which, let's take net profit as like the easy one. Apply the multiple to that, which can depend on a number of factors, maybe call it a 3x multiple, and I'm being very loose here. There's a lot of specifics required, and you can come up with an enterprise value of that company. And that's a big session, but like really there's ways and strategies that you can go through, calculations in order to develop those numbers, but getting a really clear understanding of the value of the business is super key. And the key one for that is many people think it's worth significantly more than it is. Right? Many of us are told like you're worth this much, or I think my practice is worth $2 million because that's a nice round number in my mind that buys that house I want, allows me to travel where I want. Like, you need to get a very clear understanding of the value of the business and be very, very careful with that because you don't want to overpay for the business. You want to get that accurate. And the more you can show your workings out to the person selling to say this is how much it's worth because of this, the more it becomes slightly undeniable. You've then got the offer structure, right? So we've found somebody that's interested in selling. You understand they're motivated, they want to sell. You've got a valuation of the business based on the calculations. You can then decide like what way should we structure this deal in order to ensure that you're not putting too much money down on day one. And there's 3 fundamental creative deals that I want to share with you. The first one is an earnout. The second one is seller finance. And the third one is an LBO, which leverage buyout. Earnout is I'd say increasingly more common. So this is essentially what you're doing is putting a little bit of money down and then you're paying the owner of the business over a period of time. So let's hypothetically say we agree, round numbers, your practice is worth $500,000. And we say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay you $100,000 on day one, and then we're going to pay you $50,000 for 8 years, right? I've done those maths correctly, right? And you pay the $500,000 off, but you do it as a bit of money on day one, and then we're going to pay you this year on year or month on month for a period of time. Like that is a creative way to do it. And you may find that you've got a lot of negotiation there depending on the motivation and urgency of that seller and the MUD score. But if they're super motivated, let's say they need to move away, they want to move away, they've got their family telling them they need to retire and they're desperate for that offer to come through, then you may find that the money down today could be slightly lower, but the money that you pay them over time will be more. You've then got seller finance, and this is essentially the seller finances the whole deal. Now, I was watching the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix all about the WWF, Vince McMahon, and how he bought that from his father back in the day, and that was through a seller finance deal. And essentially what that is the seller takes all the risk to a degree, and you approach the seller and say, look, I'm going to help you get out of this business, and I'm going to pay you X percentage of profit over the next however so many years, or I'm going to pay you the $500,000, but it's going to be out of the revenue and profit of the business ongoing. Like if you can do that, that's a great deal. That's a super, super creative deal, but you need somebody's motivation and urgency to exit to be really high. And if I approach that owner as like, okay, you valued at $500,000, I know you need to get out of the business. So look, let me take all the headaches. I'll take it over from Monday. I'll make this nice and smooth for you. And then over the next 5 years, I'm going to pay you $100,000 a year. And if I ever default on one of those payments, hey, the business is entirely yours again. Like you can almost give that promise and guarantee, and you're able to take that over. Like that is ultimate, right? No money down. You take over that business and you pay the seller out of the profits that the business continues to generate. The third one, an LBO, leverage buyout. there's been a lot of leverage buyouts at huge scale. So Manchester United football club, soccer team here in the UK, they were bought through an LBO, a leverage buyout, and they're one of the biggest, although it hurts me to say it, one of the biggest soccer teams in the world. Now, an LBO is essentially using the assets of the business that you're buying in order to leverage the finance to buy it. So this becomes slightly more challenging in our industry. But let's say, hypothetically, the practice you're looking to buy owns the building they're in. Like, you could use that as collateral in order to leverage finance again. So if you went to the seller and said, okay, I want to pay you this, but I need to use some of the assets in the business in order to do so. So I'm going to almost leverage against the building that you own in order to get the 500 grand out in order to pay you, send you on your way, and then I'll deal with everything else. Like, that would be an LBO. Now, look, that is fundamentally like the four key areas in order to go from first speak to somebody that may be interested in selling in order to find a creative deal. And traditionally, these kind of opportunities have been rare, right? Most people that want to exit, I want all my money on day one, or go to a manufacturer, do a unit agreement. I send the money to the seller, you take over the practice, then give the manufacturer back the money through debt. If you've got high MUD score, i.e. a seller that is motivated, needs to get out the business, maybe is overdue retirement but not had options, and he's desperate for a safe pair of hands to take over their business and legacy, creative deals like an earn-out, seller financing, or LBO are rife, right? They're happening in so many other industries right now, where we've got people who need to retire but can't retire because they can't sell their business, have nobody to take over it. In our industry, it's going to happen more and more. And right now, as we go through this boomer trend that I've been speaking so heavily about, where we're going to see 70 million over 70s over the next 6 years, like, this is going to happen more and more because 51% of the businesses in the US are owned by boomers. The amount of opportunity for creative deals is going to be incredible. And you understanding how you can leverage them and to build a group in your area that becomes huge is one of the unique ways that you can grow your practice outside of get more patients, get them to spend more often. But if you've got a great practice that's working well right now and you've got your processes ironed out and you just need growth, then this could be an alternative way for you to look. But I hope that's been helpful, because I know there's a lot of depth in there, a lot of acronyms, a lot of weird and fun stuff. But that's one thing that is a big opportunity right now that I encourage you to explore if you want significant growth. If you want steady 5%, 10%, 15% growth, probably not for you. But if you're like, nah, I'm an entrepreneur first and a hearing care provider second, then this is what I'd be looking at. But I hope that's helpful. Hopefully it didn't go over your head. I remember the first time I started learning about this, I was like, it was like being back at school and being taught a subject you just had no interest about. All the acronyms fly over your head. But I hope that was somewhat helpful, practical, and useful. But I would be now just reaching out to any providers or any owners, sellers that you know that are at a certain age where they may retire in the not too distant future and are desperate for those opportunities to come around, and just start planting those seeds. Because once you get in those conversations, there's a huge amount you can do, especially if their MUD score, motivation, urgency, and desire is high enough. But I appreciate you joining me. As always, appreciate your ears greatly, and I'll be back again next week with another episode. And there we have it. Another episode has come to an end, and I have a quick favour to ask. If you have found this helpful, then who do you know who should listen to this podcast? I strongly believe a rising tide lifts all boats, and right now, private practice needs to stick together to fight these big, gormless groups and these manufacturer-owned Goliaths that are looking to take market share from us. Consider who should be listening, pass on the word about the Business of Hearing podcast, and I'll see you again next week.